Hello.
Hi, Kato.
Hi.
Same flowers. Today I thought we'll have different flowers.
Right. Unfortunately, I hadn't had a chance to go out today, right? So the same flowers, but this photo was taken last Sunday. So I'm sure if I go there again, it looks even more beautiful.
Yeah, they're beautiful. They're beautiful. That's a good thing. That means, but for what season do you have? I mean, in terms of flowers, you have the cherry blossom from what time to what time?
They, in Japan, there are distinct four seasons, right? And we are in spring. And spring is probably from March to sort of end of May, and then we go into the sort of early summer, right? And this is the best, one of the best time, right? Because it's not very comfortable in summer and in winter, even though I like Japanese winters, but people say it's cold.
How cold is it?
Depends where you live, right? In Tokyo, it, it doesn't go very often below zero, right?
Okay.
Right? But Japan is such a sort of the island which goes quite from the south to north, right? So rather different. If you live up in the north, oh, that's very, very cold, right?
I'm sorry, I'm not offering you tea.
Don't worry, I have a tea myself.
So that way, in a way, your winter is about the same as Delhi. The only thing is your summer will not be as hot as us.
You're probably right. But uh, in Delhi, it goes beyond over 40, say
Yeah.
40
You can
degrees,
go up till 48 on the
48.
maximum. On the
Right.
maximum. So
In Japan, probably the maximum is going to be 42 or so, right? But
okay.
mind you, that is what um, the weather agency or meteorological agency there is announces. Right? What you feel on the street is different. It's much, much higher.
Yeah.
Right? I think the same would be the same applies in your place. If you go on the road, right, all the sort of the sunshine reflected from the
Concrete, yeah, so much concrete that we have, all
yeah.
that. So that's why you have this concept of feels like so much.
Yes, yeah.
The only thing is that on the golf course, at least I would say it's about 5 degrees less, according to me. It feels 5 degrees less,
Right, right,
definitely.
right,
So although I tell people that I play in the middle of summer, they would think it feels like 48, but I think it feels like less.
right.
It definitely does.
Yeah. It also depends on the humidity, isn't it? Well, if it's
Yeah.
dry, yeah, you feel okay, right?
That's the thing. We are, I mean, like you said, it's a dry climate here in Delhi.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that way, I think it's okay because humidity can kill you. That right at 32 also can be really bad.
Well, in Japan, it gets very humid in summer and very dry in winter, and people find it difficult to cope with. Uh, I don't know how familiar you are on a daily basis about humidity, but in Japan, probably goes if it becomes humid, 70%, 80% easily. Right?
That's high. Yeah, that's high.
It's very high, and if it becomes above 40,
Okay,
yeah.
so that way we are much better off. Definitely.
Yes, yes.
But Kato, you never told us what kind of professional work are you doing? We've always spoken about spirituality and all
That's probably right. Happy to talk about the professional life rather than sort of what was my family was, or, what my parents did, etc., which I probably want to keep it in my
exactly, exactly,
privacy. Yeah.
exactly. That's a private discussion which we have on that.
Right. Well, on the different occasions, we may talk about that. Right?
Yeah.
But professionally, right, it's a very good question, right? Because I've been keep changing what I've been been doing probably every 5 or 10 years, right? And I'm sort of the person who cannot just go straight and climb up. Right? I just cannot go that way, go this way, that way, right? So at the moment, but I have spent 2 years in attending the postgraduate course in psychology, right? And that was a reasonably tough one, challenging one. And it used up quite a lot of my energy. So I have to reduce my legal works, just to do what was required. That's completed last month. Was it the last month? In March. Right? So I'm gradually shifting from the psychology side to the law. But there is two things in psychology which I have to overcome later this year. One is there's 2 exams, right, to become a professional psychologist or a qualified psychologist. One is a state exam, and the other is not a state exam, but quite tough professional exams. Right? So I'm preparing for these because they go into the small details. They're just incredible, right? Which might not be a bad thing because you're forced to widen up your coverage. Right?
Which is good. That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
I think it's a good thing, but I know once I finish that one, hopefully with the passes, then there are areas of psychology which I'll probably not go back, right? For example, what is the cutoff points for this particular psychology test, right? Was that a 20 or 15 or right? To me, that's, but these are the sort of type of questions which are asked at the state exams, right? It's just pure knowledge tests. Right? So just like in which year the Napoleon went for the war.
That's totally theoretical.
It's not as radical as that, but if you don't know the answer, so what? So what in your life? But that's the way the typical sort of exam, right? So it's just not possible for me to just focus on the legal works, right? Because I have to keep remembering, right? And at our age, our memory, or at least my memory doesn't last very long.
You're not that old. You're not that old. You're not that old.
Well, thank you for the compliments, but I know that it's something we have to accept and accommodate.
But tell me, why psychology? Why did you decide
psychology? That's a good question. So, I have to admire you. Your second job should be the professional interviewer, right? Because you ask the good question at the right timing, right, without upsetting the interviewees, right?
Interview? No, it's a conversation. Don't make it an interview. It's a conversation.
Right. Oh, okay, right. It's a conversation. Right? There are a couple of reasons, right? And as often the case, there are multiple of reasons, right, for one thing, which fairly major decisions in your life course. And one which was related to my professional life was, as a mediator, you raise the same questions that why do people fight? And nobody gives answer there because our job is trying to resolve the fighting or conflict. As you see so many cases of conflicts, right? And whether it is a litigation or arbitration, it doesn't matter, but there are so much conflicts. And often people are exhausted with just going through the process. And then we say, why do the people fight? And I started, it was 3 years ago, I started seeing the books about the animals, right? This is called the comparative psychology, right? Compare animals and human beings, right? There's a
Interesting. Yeah.
comparative ones, right? And we do not see that many fighting in the monkeys, right? When we look at the young animals like puppies, right? They don't fight. They're not trained, they're not cultivated, they are in infancy, but they don't fight.
But I think,
Whereas
but their fights are those territorial fights. Basically, they have to protect their territory. For that reason, I think most of the animals, I think dogs also, lions also, I think that's what they do.
yes and no, because thanks to what I have learned over the last 2 years, 3 years, I gradually started seeing the picture because before I thought animals are vicious and it's a survival of the fittest, right? As Darwin said. And that's not quite right. Right? Do you remember the lobster story? Right?
Mhm.
In a level one,
I
they
think no, I think you better take
yeah?
us through that because look, there was a personal conversation we had. No one else has heard about it. So now I think you should take us through that.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even lobsters, right, will not go into the life or death fighting. Right? When the other side shows that I give up, right, you're stronger than me, right? Then that's end, right? And that's more or less applies to all fights that we observed in animals. And mountains, right, or elephant, whatever, the elephant, sea lions, and even insects, right? Uh, you don't have to kill the other, right? So long as the other acknowledges the defeat and goes away, you don't chase for the sake of killing it, right?
Yeah.
Human beings are different, right? Human beings, there's a no, even though they have no no reason to be aggressive no longer, right? They have secured their land, they just still go out and do naughty things or nasty things there. So I think having studied a bit about psychologies, I I think we say do something humane, or we are human beings, not animals, right?
But Kato, tell
But
me one
it's the
thing.
other way around.
But Kato, the analogy of hunting and human behavior, hunting in animals and human behavior, is there an analogy there? How, what kind of similar situation in terms of hunting do we do?
There are similarities, right? In a sense that, for example, wolves and dogs, right? They make a pack.
Yeah.
Why? Because in hunting for the bigger animals, bigger targets, they need a teamwork, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if say I assume that I'm a wolf, right, and I'm in fight with another big wolf for the territory, if I kill that wolf, right, that might be quite good thing as far as I'm concerned. But for the wolf community, we would lose a teammate when we fight for big animals, right? That's why, that's an explanation. I wouldn't say why. That's one explanation why most animals do not necessarily unnecessarily kill the other, right? Because they may become a pack, right? They may become a mates, right? In fighting in the common sort of enemies or common targets. So that's there are quite interesting way of looking at these things. We do fight, yes, and also it's common between the animals and the human beings. Mostly it's male, right, who fight, right, for the dominance, right? Because only the successor who is going through the ladder, right, will have access to the females, which is very important for reproduction of the species there, right? And that's the same probably with humans. Testosterons, right? Testosterons.
Testosterone, yeah.
Testosterone, I can say that, right? Yeah. That's predominantly with males, right? Females, right? Whether it's human being or monkeys or others, right? So there are common things there, but humans tend to go a bit extreme, right? So that's one of the reasons, right? I became interested in seeing why people fight, right? Even sophisticated people fight. Oh, that's very strange. And it has also something to do with you and me and Lisa spoke a few days ago, why there are so many supporters in the old Germany for that military regime. Right?
Yeah.
It was not merely a madman's empire. No, it was supported by millions of people there. Right? And the same thing happening everywhere. History repeats itself. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's one reason there, which had something to do with seeing the conflict there. And other perhaps reasons that there are so many people that in my sort of community or friends or my acquaintance who are suffering. Right? And in particular, I think I mentioned this one, and each time I talk about this, it just my tears comes out. But I was instructed by a friend of mine, right, who had a terminal cancer and only 3 or 6 months to live, right? And his instruction to me was, please take care of my family, right? Which I took. So I was the executor and administrator of his estates and handed over his assets to his wife and also 2 children. And his son was at that time teenagers. That was either about 10 years ago or even 15 years ago. He's now a medical doctor. Right?
Very good.
Oh, well done. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
And
you were part of that. In some way, you were part of that.
yeah, when I asked him which areas of medicines he was specialized, right? He resided in London, in Birmingham, in the UK, right? And he said he has become a British doctor, and he said that he said something which I didn't understand. When I asked what it is, right, then he said, "Oh, that's a medicine for old people," right?
Mhm.
Right? And I said, that suits me.
No, no, not yet, not yet, not yet.
Well, if we don't accept what is coming, well, we cannot prepare for that, right?
But Kato, you've seen the life expectancy, the weight has moved up. According to me, in India, I think at the time of independence
Yeah,
was something like, I think 35 or 40, something like that. So we've gone up till about 60 something now in
right,
that many
right,
years. So
right.
similarly in every country. So I think now that whole concept of what old age earlier was, it definitely has changed.
I think I have two different views. One is that that's quite right, right? And statistics prove that life expectancy in Japan, which is government give the figure for a newborn baby, right, who are born in that particular year, right?
Yeah.
And when in the year I was born, the life expectancy for male was probably something like 60, right?
Mhm.
And now we're talking nearly 80 for a
Exactly.
baby who is born today, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. But that's one side. But the other side is that that's sort of the life is a medical sense, whether you are alive or not, right? It doesn't make a distinction whether you are biologically alive but mentally incapacitated, right? Or physically bedridden, right? So when the government releases in Japan, the real sort of healthy and sound, can do things on your own without being a burden to the caregivers. Right? Even today, we're talking probably about for the men, late 60s, 70s.
Seriously?
Thereafter,
Yeah.
yeah. Thereafter, so it's no surprise that I'm 62. I look a bit younger, but
Lots younger, lots younger, lots younger.
okay. Right, but my schoolmates, right, they become so inactive, right, and so there are huge variance there, right?
But Kato, in terms of the profession, does that also make a difference? Your other friends, what profession are they in?
It's interesting, right? My friends who are in the legal professions, lawyers, they tend to remain, unless they have some physical problem there, the brain remains sharp and they can practice probably 70, 75, right? There are even some who practice until 80. I think that's become a bit questionable, right? But 75. But the most, that's a minority of my schoolmates, right, from the college or high school. Most of them join the companies and work in the company, right? And reach as high as they can. For example, I started my work as a young bank clerk, right? And
that we're going to come to. We're going to come to that first. But first, with this friend thing, I'm very interested. So they rise up in the company, they've worked there.
And what happened was that the world that you live in becomes smaller and smaller, right? Smaller and smaller. If you look at the pyramid, right? And if you want to climb up in the pyramid, it gets narrower and narrower, right? And also it throw away other people who are less efficient, right? Right? That's a survival of the fittest. What happens was if you're successful in an organization, for example, a financial institution or civil servant, right, you become lonelier and lonelier, right? And you are probably lucky if you are thrown out in your early 40s, right? Many of my colleagues, ex-colleagues, are thrown out in the mid 40s when we worked in the bank, and they got very depressed when they are rubber stamped that you are no longer good in working and climbing up in the ladder, right? But and the banks, the banks or employers usually find positions elsewhere, right? Which might be group companies if you are lucky. If you are unlucky, or if you haven't scored good, if you haven't accumulated good scores, you're maybe just thrown out, right? Okay. People call it lifetime employment in Japan. It's just nonsense, right? It's what the Westerners want to sort of symbolize Japan. It's just nonsense, right? It doesn't exist, right? But some people, it used to be that you spend the entire your working life, entirety, one corporate group, right? For example, Mitsubishi, Sumitomo, etc., right? Which often means that you do not have experience elsewhere, right? And they get depressed when they find that what they have done in the last 20 years, 30 years become useless, right? And one of the reasons, and coming back to your very excellent questions, why I wanted to study, said that I take a 2 years break and go through the psychology to myself, right? Was that when I was in the bank, I worked in the Japanese bank for 14 years, from 22 to 37, something like that. Yeah. And 2 generations higher than me. Yeah. up, right? And he was a director, main board director of quite a large bank, right? And but he was pushed aside because he couldn't get a higher than he went as high as he could be. Then he was invited to join a Japanese domestic property company, which was going from strength to strength. Right? And it was convenient for the bank to send that old boy to that company because they establish the connections, right? And they can beat the competition among bankers, other banks, right? But he could not cope with the sudden change in his, I think he was in the mid 50s or so, right? He couldn't cope with it, right? And that came, when I was already in London, right? And I received a postal card from him. He was in Japan and I was in London. And I received it in summer. In the postal card, it was a Christmas card. Weird, right? And I checked it again because I thought maybe he wanted to send it by sea mail. At that time, the sea mails, surface mail are still available.
But that also would take less time.
And I thought maybe he wanted to save a stamp, right? Oh, but he sent it by airmail, right? And weird, right? And that's a time when he was suffering mentally, right? Then, which I came to know several years later, right? And then, so he couldn't cope with sudden change, from the financial institution to the sort of dusty property company. Right? There's no elegance there. And also, this has something to do with another reason why I thought I should study psychology was I was told many years later that when he was become unstable mentally, his wife have found to suffer from cancer, and he dedicated himself to take care of his wife. Right, his wife passed away, and then he just became almost like the vacuum. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it must be very tough for him. I mean, these are
Yeah.
very, very difficult things. Yeah.
Yeah. So at the end, we are told that he took his own life, right? Because it was too much for him, right? Or was it that he lost the meaning in the life, right? And he has climbed up the corporate ladder, right? And he lost his wife, and that's very common in Japanese. The males in their 50s, right? Where their suicide rates in that generation, males, right, men, are rather high.
Is it what work related, or is it? I mean, is it the work pressure, or what
No,
is it?
no, because they have nothing anymore meaningful, they think, right, to do. And it's like, for example, if you're a professional soldier, right, and if it's okay if you become a general, right, but not everybody becomes a general, right?
Absolutely.
So you end up somewhere, or the policeman, or because of physical sort of limitations there. But what they have done is they trained themselves, experience, and they went through the hardship as a soldier. They are still good as a soldier, right? But there's nothing. What should I do, right? And then many of them go into the alcoholism, drug, substance abuse, or domestic violence, etc., etc. Right? So uh, I recall that my senior ex-colleagues who are two generations older than me, became like that. And I've thought, I don't want to become like that, you know. And there's a limit how long you can continue to practice law, because law is keep changing, right? And it becomes harder and harder, right, to keep up with all the development. And with hindsight, you know, that was when England, because I'm English lawyer, right? I'm not Japanese lawyer. I can practice only English law, right? And you know that the United Kingdom used to be a part of Europe, right? And that was such a headache to me, right? Because I was trained and brought up, and I became quite good as English lawyer, right? When I was practicing in a London law firm, right, so many European directives are passed, right, by the people in Brussels, right, which we don't know much about that, right? And that is passed by the European members of parliament, you know. And yeah, we don't come across these people very often. And out of a sudden, Brussels issues the sort of directives, right, which is the instruction to the member states and say, you introduce a statute along this line, right? And the consultation period is minimum, right? And in most solicitors are saying, oh,
Where did this come from? Where did this come from?
what's that, right? And the same applied to the UK government, right? Because what they often done in majority cases is that if there is a whatever data protection, whatever directive, which is an instruction from the Brussels, right? Then copy paste it and code it act, right? And here comes the also a very interesting thing about the different way of thinking on the common law and civil law, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And for the common law lawyers, your common law lawyers, you know, we find it important that the principles, right? And it doesn't have to be written on the statute, right? Just trace what the court has made their interpretations or decisions, right? And the court often makes new laws, right?
Yep.
Not only interpreting, constructing what the statute book says. In Europe, it's different, right? It's a civil law, right? Statute, what's written in a paper is the law, right? And we had such a big conflict, which I think people, particularly in the judiciary, had a hard time in switching their mind. Right? And oh, thank God that's no longer. So the official position is we are still bound by the European law and the judgment, jurisprudence up until the departure date. But thereafter, we don't have to worry about what comes next, right?
Makes life a little easier.
We know what we want to do. We know we've been doing this for hundreds of years, right? And so I think that was probably subconsciously in my mind, going back to the why I thought I should take a bit of a break there. It was rather confusing to my brain, right? Try to understand and acquire knowledge and how they apply in so many areas of European laws, right? And I thought, if things goes in the diversify and becomes like the monster, right? And that's why you need a specialist in small areas. Right? But difficulty is that when they say that I'm specialist, it usually means that my coverage is narrow, right? Because For example, I'm a doctor, medical doctor, but I only look at the skin problems, right?
Huh.
And then it becomes a bit extreme. Oh, but by the way, I only look, I'm a specialist on the left side skin, right? Not the right hand. No, 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 go somewhere. I'm specialist here, right? It's just crazy, right? As I have been all-rounder or general practitioner, and I think many sort of lawyers in India are somewhat similar. You do everything for your clients, right?
Yeah.
Right? At least you try. Yeah, yeah. And it's no longer possible to know everything is what's happening in your body, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I thought that maybe I can continue to practice several years at the top notch, in the top level, right? But there would come a point where I should look for something something new, right? And I know from my experience as well as from my research, for every new discipline or every new things, you need 10 years of hard work. 10 years. And whether it's a sports, for example, Vikram, you are a keen golfer, right? And if somebody says that I can become a professional golfer in just 3 years, not going to happen, right? Right.
Bu- But
I,
in this
I,
case, look, why I'm saying that in this case I might disagree is because actually some of these people put in so much work in that much time that they can
yeah,
actually turn pro earlier also. Lot of work they put. I mean, seen the younger ones, very
yeah,
hard work. They work really hard.
yeah, yeah. But there are genius, also diligent people there, but in most cases, 10 years is a benchmark. And
Yeah,
which, when I have a look at my legal back careers, I think I spent probably 3 to 4 years to become a lawyer, English lawyer, and then 5 to 6 years to have enough confidence all together 10 years. And I worked in a bank for 14 years, and it was probably after the first 10 years and I started feeling comfortable and confident. Right? So I go back to my schoolmates' programs when they suddenly are thrown out in their late 40s, 50s, and they don't have energy left to start something new. And even if can they take the challenge, it takes 10 years for them to be at the sort of a good level, right? And most people find it impossible. So I'm probably the only one in my classmates who are going always like this. Right?
no, but
Right.
Kato, I hear about this whole concept of sleep deprivation in the people who work in Japan, and I don't know what's the reason. They're actually sleep deprivation deaths also which take place. What is all that about?
Well, there are probably two. At the moment, it's different because we are in a COVID situations there, right? Just before COVID situations there are probably two good reasons why people have sleep difficulties, whether we call it deprivation. One is that too much stress at work, right? And also the second reason is the physical ones. The commuting was rather tough, right?
Yeah.
If you think about, you may say that it's tougher in India.
For some people, yes, yeah, it
But
is.
yeah, being in a crowded one, there's a body here, body here, body here, right?
Yep,
And
that's
every day, right, in the morning and in the evening, 1.5 hours, at least 1 hour doing this, right? Yeah, yeah, it's no good, right?
the big. Sometimes we used to see these videos about people being totally like put into those trains, like push it. Does that really happen?
Pushing, right?
And there's
Well,
actually someone who has to do it on the platform. Is it? Oh.
yeah, the station guards, right? There are people that took place 20 years ago, or probably 15 years ago. Right? I don't think they do it any longer. Right?
Okay, those are
I
old
haven't
videos.
seen it, right? But they're pushing it, pushing it, pushing it, right? And we're like, oh, 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 right? I remember when I started working in the bank in Tokyo, every day was like this. Right? And I was lucky because the bank sent me to Germany and then to the London for overseas assignments. But that was tough, right? So the physical things, too much stressful ones, and do you get relaxation at home? Not really. Let's assume typical is sort of somebody who works in the companies, and then when he or she go back home, right, exhausted, right, don't want to even talk to your family, right? And then kids said something, your partner said, right? No, just right. And when you continue that sort of lifestyle for considerable years, that show up, right? And if it is a sleep deprivations, that's very common. It was quite, with hindsight, it was a bit frightening. Most, majority of my university sort of friend, alumni, right, or school, because I studied finance, we went into the financial institutions like banks, right? And I was a lucky one because my workplace was hard, but not that bad, right? Those who went to other banks said that it's a common things among the office that everybody has stomach ulcers, right?
Okay.
And then they take medications during the day because it just aches, right? Yeah. And it was such a crazy time that we lived. Right? Things had changed because uh, to some extent, it's strange that in our generations, we still try to sort of put up with it. Right?
Yeah, because you people were developing Japan. I mean, the whole Japan had to be developed after whatever you've seen. So I think that kind of onus had come on your generation.
Well, perhaps our generation, my generation, was the only one who had seen the hint of the post-war, right? Immediate
Yeah.
sort of the aftermath of the war, right? Because I remember that rice was rationed, right? That is, every household had ration cards for the rice, right? But younger generations who haven't had their experienced, for example, hunger, right? Because the foods are abundant. The situation is now different, Vikram, right? Yeah, it's hard to believe, but poverty has come back in Japan.
Seriously.
Yes, and that's another reason which I said that maybe there are something important in the life which is missing in my portfolio. Right? That's children in poverty has come back,
Hmm.
and particularly there are much more larger number of single mothers. Right? And in the past, even if they are physically abused by their husbands, they put up with them, right? Because they had no choice, right? Financially. Right? But when the Japanese economy boomed, right, they felt that they can financially sort of withstand there being a single income. Right?
But are they well represented in the workforce?
Sorry.
Are the women well represented in the workforce now?
There are a fair number of the proportions of the workforce. I haven't got a figure with me, but most of them, and that's the problem, most of them are in their sort of insecure jobs, right? Like a fixed time contracts. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, we call it in Japan the part-time, but that's misleading because they work full-time, right? But
The contract is limited. Yeah.
their contract is limited and they do not have a protection, full protection under the employment laws. So when the economy shrinks, well, they are the first to made redundant. And what happened was that desperate mothers had two works, right? During the daytime, she might do office works, and then in the evening, they work as a shop assistant in a convenience store, something like that, right? But then when the COVID came, even the convenience stores started cutting down the jobs. And also, again, I think that's worldwide, we have now less, but still a huge proportion of immigrant workers in Japan. And
From where are they coming?
from at first it was from China, but no longer, right? They are at such a higher status now. The Philippines, right? Vietnam. I think now we see probably Vietnam a lot, right? And they have taken up these sort of simple work, relatively simple works, right? Jobs, right? And therefore, the single mothers, who, if they had professional skills like accountants, right, that's fine, right? They will they have a better chance, but most of them do not have particular skills, so they couldn't. They are out of jobs, and then if they are, for example, working as a receptionist at hotels, right, then so many hotels are closed because they have no visitors, right?
Yep.
And, or if they are working in a kitchen in restaurants, they are just made, in English term, redundant. They're laid off there. And what happens was they look for jobs desperately but can't find them. If they are relatively young, they can go for the sort of entertainment industry. I think you guess what sort of entertainment,
yes.
right? But when they are sort of middle-aged, late-aged, there's physically no work, no sort of legitimate works there. And as a result, they have one meal a day. Their kids have one meal a day. And this is also shocking news to me. The ladies in the childbearing age, right? They have a periods, right? But there was a surveys taken in that age population, and something like 30% of them said that they find it economically challenging to buy sanitary napkins or tampons.
That's
Right?
serious.
For guys, we just can't believe it. Right? What? Right?
Absolutely.
And even university students, right? Young ladies, they say that, so my parents have lost job, right? And I was supplementing my income by doing a waitress, but that's gone. And I have no money. I have just enough to buy rice, but I have no money for tampon, right? Or napkins, right? And that came as a shock to the politicians, right?
Absolutely.
And some local authorities are saying that they come to our office. We'll give it free to you. Right? Yeah. Because they are so shamed. But this it has become known just about the last a few months. And it just unbelievable when we see that's what the COVID has done to us is rich people become richer and poor people become poorer. And disparity becomes,
Increases.
right? It's huge. And
No, but what kind of conditions are they living in? What is
I think typically, whether they, some people say that they are small minorities. I don't think they are, but they live in a rented house, probably one room, and I would say 4 meters, 5 meters. Yeah. And if they're lucky, they may have another room or another, but they live in a cramped one. Now we're talking about large cities like Tokyo and Osaka.
But how much in the outskirts will they be?
If it is outskirts, then they're probably double size, right? But mind you, the problem is that if you go to outskirts, right, there are no jobs, right? Right. And so it's quite, it tells us, teaches us a lot of things, right? When we see the sudden change of the society, the richer get richer. People who, for example, they bought Bitcoins a year ago are just laughing, right?
I don't know what the Bitcoin is doing these days, but I'm sure
Yeah.
there must have, there must be.
Or gold. If you have bought gold a year ago, you're just smiling all the time, right? Dreaming. Wow, what a wonderful life. But on the streets, there are, funny enough, this time, Japan has up and downs, right? This time, we do not have people very many people who are sleeping rough on the streets. I don't know why. There are not that many. Right? We used to see this sort of people sleeping rough in the parks quite a lot in Tokyo. They have a tent, and yeah, it was sort of part of the site which people don't want to see.
No, that's a very sad thing. I mean, it's really sad that countries develop, everything develops, but this aspect doesn't change. There might be fewer in Japan than obviously maybe in other countries that might be more. India, definitely there'll be lots more, but just the fact that doesn't change. There's some issue in the development process.
Yeah.
No, but what about opportunities in the rural areas?
Opportunity in the rural areas, right? One thing which can be said across Japan is that younger generations are still remaining in their hometowns. When they choose for example, college, they want to go to big cities like Tokyo, Osaka, right?
Yep.
And once they do it, they will not come back, right? Simply because there are not enough jobs around. Right? Situation may change, right? Because I wouldn't say many, but more companies or employers are starting allowing the people to work from home, teleworking,
Exactly.
remote
Yeah.
working.
Yeah. That should help. That should help. Yeah.
Yeah. So that might help, right? But
because it's very high. When I look at the percentage, it's almost 92% is urban population in Japan.
oh yes, it's very much concentrated in two large areas, Tokyo, Osaka, and to some extent Nagoya, right? Where the Toyota is located, right? But it's very concentrated. But when we say rural areas, most of the rural areas are mountainous, not habitable, right?
Okay.
So it's always there's a concentration in Japan, right? And funny thing is that there are even more concentrations increasing in Japan. For whatever reason, sociologists find it exciting, right?
Obviously. That's the
They
next
come up,
one, Kato. That's the next area that you're going to get into, from psychology now to sociology also.
they are mixed creatures, right?
Yeah.
Sociologists,
Yeah.
and because there's an area called sociopsychology.
Okay. So Kato, that's an area for you now.
Yeah, I think, and mind you, when the psychologist said the sociopsychology, that includes the family as well. It's strange, right? But for these people, society includes your relationship with your family member, even spouses.
But what about your family? We haven't found out about your family.
I don't want to talk about my
Okay.
family, right? We say that we talk about something about professional life, right?
Okay. Okay. And
Okay.
Japan and the world and mediation with all that, but not the
Yeah,
family.
okay, right. Spirituality.
Yes. And some videos, some animal videos also.
Yes, puppies. I love puppies, right? Right. There is one thing I want to try with you, if it's okay with you, because I tried, but I thought I just cannot do it myself. And I thought you are going to help me, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. May I show it on the screen?
Please, please.
Uh, is there any fixed time for this, for
Not
the
at all.
session?
Not at all, Kato. That's why we kept it early. That's why we kept it early, so you are not
Okay,
sleepy.
thank you. Can you see it?
Yep.
Let me see it. Ah, we have something we know very much, right?
I have this in my system now. I've
And
just
it says,
yeah, yesterday I put this in my system, in my body.
yeah. Uh, have you read this article?
Mhm.
Have you?
No.
Right, okay. The headline, it says, if one looked at the law and its process from these lines, then one realizes that it is no different from what the notion of karma is in the spiritual sphere.
Mhm.
Just when I read this, when I note this one, I don't quite understand. I have some idea about karma, but what he's talking, what he or she is talking about, right? And then this was written about a year ago, and I picked up the interesting part in yellow. Right? And when I say interesting, half of it is from the critical point of view, right? And this writer says that's he said something about this COVID, right? Because it says that here, this sentence, I just read out, there is a feeling that in the face of the threat of death, human beings have only begun to reflect seriously. The greedy heart is purify the virus. It says purify the virus. The environment is no more polluted. The nature has proved that it is mightier than humans. The virus has reminded us that there is an almighty and humans are just humans. Right?
Well, let me tell you, Kato, let me tell you that this is very nice. The only thing is we have such short memory that during that time, during the lockdown, everyone was saying all these nice things and we've realized things. The moment the lockdown finished, it was back to life. It's like, I'll tell you, when you go to, people go to a cremation or a burial or go to a
Yeah.
funeral, for that half an hour, 1 hour, suddenly all the spiritual thoughts will come in and they'll realize that, okay, we are not going to live forever, and then they walk out from there. It's back to the same game that they play all the time.
But Vikram, you're absolutely right, and that's the healthy, right? Because otherwise we're stuck in the past, right? And it's a grieving process we need to go through hopefully quickly. But let me come back to you, because there are some
But no, but
parts
this
which,
past I don't mind. This past we don't mind. That during that time, all those good
yeah,
thoughts that came, that
yeah,
past is a good past to keep in our head.
yeah, probably there are some truth there. There is, he said, there is an almighty and humans are just humans. Yeah, humans are just humans. I agree. Yeah, and the person, the writer says, the virus is facilitating cultivation of good habits. It is making us realize that only by our love for each other we shall be able to overcome this pandemic, right? That's, I do not quite understand. I do not quite follow. It's not, it's not love. We need money to buy vaccines, right? Jabs, right? So I don't think love is everything, but let's move on, right? And he's saying that, for example, humans have woken up to the new reality. Hate is diminishing. Hate is diminishing, right? Meanness is vanishing, and love for each other, as well as other creatures on the earth, including towards nature, is rising, right?
That was a good period when this was happening. That was a
I,
good time.
I think there is maybe a one side, but I think across the world, I think hate is increasing, right?
No, I'm sure. I'm sure. Look, at that point of time, definitely these thoughts had come in.
Yeah,
That's what you used to hear. Look, our information on what's happening in the world is through social media, through WhatsApp
yeah,
messages. So
yeah,
those are all. It all looked very nice at that point of time.
yeah. I know that you're going to say that mass media is agitating, and I agree to some extent. But the writer sums up and say, if I sum up, we are become spiritual.
Hmm.
Bravo, spiritual, right? So I kept reading it, right?
But tell me, Kato, did you have a look at my website? Have you had a look at my website?
Only at the bottom of it.
That's the sad part. Let me show you something that I've written there. Let me show you right now.
Right
Okay,
now.
right
Okay.
now. First, let me go. Give me 1 minute. Why I want to show
I
you
have
this
to
is
stop
because
sharing it. Do I?
no, I can do it. I can.
You do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the website. This is
I can't see it.
okay. Wait. Let me. Give me 1 minute. Let me.
I think oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. This is what I had written on my website.
Impact in various ways. Are you saying that the virus is purifying us?
But I said, hopefully, due to the pandemic, we are becoming or should become less adversarial.
Phew.
I mean, this is
So
what the
sorry.
hope was.
It's a small print, and with my eyesight I cannot read.
Okay, let me try and increase the fonts. I mean, let me see if I can. Any better?
Oh yeah, yeah. Mediation fits in perfectly in such a state of mind. Online
This
mediation.
is what the belief is and will be. Hopefully, we'll be able to understand this. But how long? That's the main thing.
Right, right. With that blessing, perhaps can I go back to what I was
Yeah, back to share screen. Back to
talking?
share
Right.
screen. Yeah, your screen.
Yeah.
So I'm just telling you that
But
these are thoughts which had definitely come to everyone. It's not just you and me. It's the way we were looking at things. Hopefully, we'll stick there. I'm not saying that there are going to be people who stick there, but in general, when I'm saying our memories are so short, we'll be
yeah,
back to square one.
yeah. Okay. I hope
And
that will be the case, right? And
th-
then let's move on, right? Because the writer has a section called spirituality here, right? That's interesting, right? And he says the essence of spirituality is distinct from religion and traditions. That I agree, right?
yep.
And spirituality is being true to oneself. That's also I agree. It is a quest for ascertaining the truth Oh, I'm not quite sure, but okay, right?
Your truth, yeah, your truth, whatever your truth is. Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
it depends on what you mean by the truth. But he or the writer keep going to, by increased touch with oneself, right? Spirituality helps us to rise above our base instincts, prejudice, and this is a bit strange one. It stereotypes everything. So
This
I
might
don't
be,
quite.
yeah, yeah. This might be maybe there's
I
some.
think he got it wrong, right? Yeah.
No, maybe
I think
something in the, maybe there's a typing issue somewhere.
I think it's the opposite should be right.
Instead of it might have been not, and
Right.
not stereotyping. Something, maybe something like
Yeah.
that. I don't know, whatever
It
the
it
plan was.
will it should say that there are the spirituality will release us
Yes,
or escape us from stereotype things, right?
exactly. When they're saying
Yeah.
out of prejudices
Yep.
and biases and stereotypes, we have to, that I think maybe he was trying
Yeah.
to say that.
And when the writer says, right, when we are true to ourselves and we are constantly in touch with ourselves, it is easy for us to locate where the false inputs come from. Spirituality then is what mends the breach within ourselves. That's pretty good, right? I'm nodding, right? It's very good. Then he moves on to next section. I said he, but that's written by a male person.
So this is our Indian retired judge from the Supreme Court.
Don't tell his name,
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
right? Uh, because I'm saying something critical about.
Okay.
I don't want to be what you call it in a
Contempt of court. No
court,
contempt.
right?
He's okay. He's retired now. It's okay.
Could you defend me if that happens?
We'll just keep you in Japan. You're defended.
Yeah, okay. Right. So he says that although law focuses on our separate bodies and spirituality focuses on that unseen which unite us, they are interactive and mutually dependent entities. So what he's saying is law, justice, and spirituality are connected, right? Okay, right?
Is it?
And
Is he saying that?
that's what he's saying,
He's
right?
saying law focuses on our separate bodies and spirituality
Yeah.
focuses on the unseen, which unites us. So he's trying to say
Yeah.
it's different.
But he says here, law and spirituality
Are
are
bound together.
bound
Yeah. There he
together
says.
at a fundamental level, right? Right? And he says, accordingly, one tends to find peace and happiness flourishing where law supports spirituality, right? I don't quite understand what is meant by law supports spiritualities, right?
That's
And
okay. I mean, no, but it's okay. That's okay. That should be
well,
the
that's probably
situation.
okay. Okay,
That should be
right?
the situation in any case. That's the way you
Yeah,
expect law to be.
yeah,
It should be fair. It should be,
yeah.
of course,
And
whatever else that it has to be. But the fact is that if there is some kind of a base in spirituality, because look, you are looking at law from the perspective of the law books and the statutes and the acts that we look at today. Law
yeah,
is not what we see today. Law is something which has been there in the world for, I mean, how long? It's been there all throughout. So did it have a base in spirituality earlier, and then we moved out of it? That's that you have to study. Kato, you are the person who has got that bent of mind.
well, thank you for your input, and it echoes, resonate with the next one. Justice as an ideal has a spiritual value which express spiritual humanism, which is the ultimate goal of our civilization. Bravo, right?
Yep.
And then just move a bit because I can spend hours and hours, right?
It's okay. We have hours and hours. You don't worry
Yeah.
about that.
But this also very nice things, for our conscience to be able to assess the situation at hand and to be able to make our minds rational, we rely on spirituality, right? That may be, right?
We
And
should rely. I
also,
think what we should say is we should rely on spirituality. The
yeah,
problem is we are not doing it. That's the only issue.
agree, right? And I also like this passage. I skipped this one, but they both believe that people suffer because of their own evil actions. Right? One calls it crime, and the other calls it sin. So
But then we moved
justice
out. Yeah,
calls it crime,
no, then
and
we moved
spirit.
out of then I think we moved out of spirituality and we've gone into religion now. Sin is more of a religion based thing, because when it comes to spirituality, will it be still a sin? It will be your own truth, whatever your truth is, and you have to gauge it with that truth that you have.
Yeah. I agree with you, but the writer tries to say that the law will label it as a crime,
Yeah.
whereas a spirituality labels it as sin, but they have something in common between them. So he says that so both can unite their efforts, both means law and spirituality, can unite their efforts in order to create a better society where people get social, economic, and political justice.
What I'm saying is that if you are guided by spirituality, you don't need law. If the exactly, I mean, so society itself is going to move in that path. I think that should be the ideal. We should move to that ideal, that we
well,
don't need law.
welcome to the club, but you've got to be mindful of the possibility of contempt of court.
Oh, now who's going to defend me?
He's
I'll have to,
retired, by the
no,
way.
I'll have to call him one of these days on the show, but I'll have to tell him that this was just a discussion on your article. That's
Right?
all. A
And
critical
then
analysis. That's all.
this is very interesting, right? Because I agree. The growing spirituality is to raise your values to a higher level and translate those higher values, right, into action in all that you do. That's great, right? I think whatever we do in mediations or studies or discussion conversations, we should aim to uplift our values to higher levels
That
there.
look, that's why Kato, that whole thing of mediators, mediation, and
Yeah.
spirituality. The idea behind was that because in the mediation you don't have to be guided by the law, and
Yeah.
that is where you have the option of being guided by spirituality.
Then you and I have no problems in sort of coming to that view. I totally agree. And let me go to this one. And he says that there is a need to understand the importance of the mind. Fine, okay. A mind which can work rationally only if it is in peace, can cogently form argument only when it is relaxed and able to concentrate on vital aspects. And this is interesting. This is where medication lends us a helping hand. So we need a tranquilizer, right?
Okay, maybe it's a misprint. Come on, maybe it's a misprint. Here was he talking about mediation.
No, we are not talking about
It's
mediation.
medication only. It's a medication only.
No. What
No,
he meant was
I know. Yeah,
meditation.
yeah, I know. I read that. I'm just
Yeah,
saying that in this
but,
case,
but yeah,
yeah. Mm.
that's here we see the very common sort of confusions there. Even somebody at the status mixed up with medications, right? So there is where tranquilizer, major tranquilizer, lends us a
So that's what
helping
we have to do. We have to put society on that, and then everything gets sorted out.
hand.
And
And he goes on and say we need to use our conscience to apply, understanding the rights and reason responsibilities. We require the subtleness and sensitivities in our conscience. I think
oh,
that's
okay,
great.
okay. Let me tell you. Look, at that point of time, just read that medication as meditation. Please read it as that. Don't read it as medication. You will be. That is what he's going to point out, and that's going to be. Just read it as that. Otherwise, we'll get into medication, and then we talk about Indian society with a lot of substance use has been there in earlier times. We'll get into all that. That keep that. Everyone uses that, and everyone is very tranquil, and society
Medication.
that medication.
Where we're talking about crime and substance abuse,
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
suddenly medication came up. Right?
Okay, so let's read it as meditation. Okay, so that's what we're going to
So
read it
we,
as.
we read it as a meditation, right?
Yes, yes.
And when breeder gets more sophisticated, they will interpret it meaning mediation there, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And
Then law, spirituality, and
yeah,
mediation, and the entire concept. That's where it's all linked there. It's all linked to, like, I'm just
yeah,
trying to.
yeah,
What we are trying to do is we're cutting the law out of the picture.
yeah.
Do we really
And
need a law? Do people really need a law if they're moving in that direction? That is what we have to also
yeah.
look at.
And I come to the last sentence and where I need your help. It says spirituality says Sarvayan Hitaya,
Sarvajan hitaya, sarvajan sukhaya.
Sarvajan
In the
Sukhiya.
For everyone's
Could you
benefit,
explain what it means?
and for everyone's, what would you say? Sukh is like, I mean, would I say, pleasure? Would I say in their happiness?
Happiness, right?
Yeah, I mean, it can
Prosperity.
go, not prosperity, not
Oh,
prosperity. So, well, that would be a little different. But happiness, take it as happiness, simple definition.
happiness, right?
So,
Okay, right. That's precisely what the mediators want to do, achieve, is a conflict resolver, right? And then his last sentence, he concludes by saying that spirituality and the judiciary should play a complementary and collaborative role to bring about peace and harmony in the society. That I don't know. I shouldn't say any negative comment on the what's happening in the Indian jurisdiction, right?
no, but
But
I'm telling you, this is where the problem lies. Because the point is that, can these people move out of the law? They're so stuck with the law that they are interpreting or they have to follow, that can they move out of it? Which, look, in our case, we have the Supreme Court and the High Courts. They, under the Constitution, have much wider powers, so they have discretion on lots of things. They have that. They have certain articles whether you can use that discretion. So in that case, are they going beyond the law? They do go beyond the law, and whatever they do say there are cases where obviously that, because what the Supreme Court says is anyway law becomes law when their
right,
judgments are law.
yeah, yeah.
So in that case, they can move out on those things, but otherwise, in general, they're quite stuck with what the law is. So that is
Well,
where that's the limitation.
well, the uh, the impression I received when I read the last sentence was that that's fair enough, but we cannot wait for 10 years. Am I right? Often in India, litigation lasts for 10 years.
Oh, that's the best part. The normal litigation could last much longer, but when it comes to these public interest litigations, writ petitions, sometimes you get quick decisions on that.
Right.
Some of them, those also get stuck for years.
Yeah.
But there, I think there the judiciary kind of can bring in some kind of spirituality into the whole thing. But it's,
Well,
look, let me tell you, it's not about spirituality. Basically, the point is that law has to be fair and reasonable.
I think I agree with you. You
And
know,
if it's not, no, even if it's not, you challenge the law.
yeah,
So that's where the judiciary comes in, that to
yeah,
weigh it from that perspective.
yeah. I think what he said, going back to what he defined as spirituality, is interesting. Uh, the essence of spirituality is distinct from religion and traditions. Spirituality is being true to oneself, right?
Yep.
But toward the end, right, I start feeling that the spirituality in his context is something along their sort of judicial sort of fairness, and that's not quite spirituality, right, to
Absolutely,
myself.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So that was an interesting one. Thank you so much for going with me. And as I said, I'm going to ask you to defend myself if I get into trouble.
No, no, I think he's a good person. He's a good person. He's not going to. He's not going to do.
Right?
He'll be.
Out
I
of
think. I'm sure he's
courtesy,
going to love discussing it with you.
Out of courtesy, I have blacked out, deducted his name here.
No, I mean, look, it's good to have judges who, because look, after you've sat on the bench for so many years, you do
Yeah.
realize the limitations that the law puts on you and the role of the judiciary. You start looking at it differently, because definitely when you start off as a judge, the concept of law and with upholding the law and all those things come to you. But then as you move on, there is a different view on law also. And then you
Yeah.
get into a situation where you can actually do something about it, because at the lower courts and everything, those judges are stuck. They can't go beyond it. But as you come to the high court and you come to the Supreme Court, that your role becomes that much wider, so you can actually start looking at the larger good, and you can actually do something about it.
Yeah. Mind you, there is a quite distinct difference between common law and civil law in that point, I think, right? Because
Yeah.
when I was practicing, was that I was just qualified in London. I received a visit of 3 judges from Tokyo, two from Tokyo District Court and one from Tokyo High Court. High Court is like a court of appeal, right?
Mhm.
And they came to London and say, we want to have a sort of a feel about how English court and the judicial system is working, etc. Right. So I took care of them, right, and they brought them into a couple of places, etc. And when their stay came to the end, today is the last day, I asked them, so what was your finding in London? Right? And then one person, and that person was very frank and say the person was from the district court, so at the first instance, right? And who said that I was amazed that in English courts, judges are making laws. I was amazed. What do you mean by that? Right? No, because the professional judge, right, they join the courts as civil servants, right? So as professional judges, our job is to interpret constructive necessary, but mainly to apply the existing laws. And it just never occurred to me that courts will produce new laws. And I became just speechless. What? We had a quite significant gap there, which I didn't notice because we spoke in Japanese, right? But when he touched that one, I felt that, oh gosh, right? Because I didn't study Japanese law, right? I studied English law only, right? So, oh, there is a quite big gap there. Right? Of course, when the person becomes at the higher courts, like Supreme Court judges, right, then I think that's probably the different, right? Because they know the answer already, and then they go backwards, how to justify it, right? The higher you goes, you don't apply
Yeah.
blindly, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, go back to that. That's a long story about how I became interested in studying psychology, and
No, but then you have to tell us, first of all, you while you were in the bank, then you decided, I want to do law now.
yes, I was quite good at banking sectors, but I became bored. I tend to have a habit of getting bored in after 10 years.
Okay, so
I was
basically, okay. So basically, after 10 years, you decided to study,
no,
pursue law.
no, after 14 years, and that's a time just when the bubble economy has started to come, right? Uh, in Japan, probably you might have heard, Nikkei was so high, Nikkei index was so high, and even ordinary people are eating noodles, right? Noodles, right? With gold plate on it. That's ridiculous because it's tasteless, right? But they couldn't buy a gold bars, but they could buy gold sort of sort of thin ones, right? It's just crazy time we had. And I didn't have a fun because I was located in London. But I started feeling that there's something wrong, right? Something wrong somewhere. Is it going to continue? And then I became a bit bored with, because I have learned all I could possibly learn from working in a bank. Right?
But your studies were in Japan.
I studied monetary economics, like John Maynard Keynes.
Yeah.
Right? This pure theoretical economics. That was my area.
But that was in Japan. So that was when you graduated in 83.
What was that?
Because I see on your LinkedIn profile, but only thing is it's in Japanese. It says from 78 to 83, but it's in Japanese. So I don't know what that qualification is. I see a 75 to 70.
No. I graduated in 1970 something. Right?
Okay, 76. There is a general course in monetary economics from London School of Economics.
Yeah. The year after, the following year, I graduated with monetary economics there. Then I joined the Japanese bank, and are you looking at my web
LinkedIn profile? Yeah.
There is an English side versions to the right.
No. It is in English. Only one part is still in Japanese. That's a 1978 to 1983. That's in Japanese. So I don't know what that is. Everything else I can read, but
I have to check it. Right? So, well, I said to myself that I have probably
okay. So that's
learned.
No, I think that's missed out. Basically, on your profile, what you graduated in 1977, what you did in 1977 is not mentioned here.
Right.
That's not part of the profile. So that's the missing link. That's what I could not understand what was happening here.
Yeah.
Because 77, you joined the bank.
Yeah, that's right. And after for 12 years, 13 years, I thought there's not going to be very much more I can learn, or I can acquire. It was fun, and I had a very good learning. And
but where all did you get posted?
I was posted first in Japan headquarters, and then branch in Tokyo. Then I was sent to Germany for 2 years to study German language and to do the training with the local German bank. Came back to Japan, then went to London, and I was at their London branch for 7 years. The last 7 years I worked in London.
So basically about 1985 you reached London.
Yes, the last, so it's, I came to London when I was 30 years old, and stayed there for 25 years, something like that. Yeah.
So how was it? So you saw London change over those years? What was it like?
In a sense, yes. I talked about this European Union bit. when I arrived at London, when I arrived at London, that was Mrs. Thatcher's time, right? And one thing I remember that was funny is that I arrived at the airport, then went to the airport, the hotel near the airport, because it was late, right? And I watched the TV, and probably that was BBC, and I couldn't understand a word, if not even a single word coming from the BBC, right? Right. And I was very worried, right? Because, oh my God, I'm going to work here, right? Live here and work here. It later turned out that was broadcasting the results of general elections, right? And it was broadcasting part of Wales. Because have you heard of the Welsh language?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally
Like,
different.
completely different. Right? There's no resemblance at all. Right? But anyway.
But over the 30 years that you spent there, you did start understanding Welsh or not?
Wales, I had some work to do in Wales, and probably paid a visit over 20 times to see the factory and to do the works there. Also, closure of the factories there. And at the end, almost nothing. Right? And it's funny, when you stay at the hotel in the Wales, Cardiff, right? And just turn on the TV, right? Mostly the broadcaster, BBC, that's broadcasted in English language. Right? But at the breakfast time, it's Welsh. Right? Oh, God, right? What they're talking about. And also, that was a time, I don't know how it is now, but there is if you go to the remote areas in Wales, then there are still local people who only spoke and understood Welsh. Even the UK company's house, I had access to company's house for my clients' administrative matters, and you have a choice. Do you want to have it in English or Welsh, right? So it's still alive there. Right?
Yep. But what about the other accents? You got used to the other accents?
Other accents are it's like the English dialect, right? Scottish accents are not that difficult, right? There are some part in, for example, Yorkshire and a bit north, where they speak similar to Welsh, Gaelic, right? In the Scandinavian language, the dialect. That's a hard one, right? Northern Ireland, right? They speak like Americans, or Americans like speak like Irish, right?
Okay, so basically they don't speak English. That's what you're saying.
We understand anyway, right? Welsh, no way, right? But coming back to why I left the bank, right? Because I didn't think that was the time, that.
No, you have to first tell me all the interesting things, the nice things that you did in London. You have to tell us more about the London that you grew up. It's like you look, in a way, you grew up there. So many years that you spent there.
Yeah, I was quite active in London. I was lending money against property, the commercial property lending. And I became quite talkative and giving talks and lectures and seminars to many sort of British investors, because that's the time when Japanese money started coming to the UK for purchase of quite landmark buildings there, right? And I remember that once or twice I was invited to give an after-dinner speech on a black tie occasion. And that was fun. I loved it. But anyway, so I thought that time is coming to the end for Japanese bubble. I don't know how long it's going to last. Right? And also, that's a time when I received the Christmas card. Right? I felt, that's something wrong, right? So I said to my boss, who was a branch manager or branch general manager, and said that I think I have learned enough, and I'm very thankful. I've been taking care of the directors, senior management, but it's probably the time for me to start doing on my own.
No, but were you overworked? Were you overworked? You were working late nights and all those things?
I enjoyed it. Right? I was a workaholic, right? But I was responsible for probably 300 million US dollar equivalent of the investment portfolio at the bank, right? And it's a fun, right? You have a responsibility, right? You create the portfolios bit by bit, and then it was such a professional satisfaction there, right? And that's when I acquired the skills of how to write a memorandum to be circulated to your senior board. Right?
That's the that's a major learning that you have to have.
Oh yes, right. That's why I'm still good at writing something which the people will just rubber stamp it. So I wanted to have a change. So my boss asked me, what you're going to do? And I said, I have no idea, but I want to have a break. Right? And then I took a break. Right? It took a half a year for my boss to build up a consensus among the board members that Teruo Kato is leaving, right? Because some people are not happy that I'm leaving, right? But eventually they recognize that it's my free choice, right? And then purely by coincidence, I was approached by a local firm of solicitors, lawyers. They wanted to receive the works from me because I was using local lawyers for my investment activities. Right? So I was using English lawyers, and they wanted to have a slice of business. And I keep saying, no, I'm happy with with a couple of firms that I have been using. But a particular firm was quite keen. And then when I received the green light to tender my resignation, right? Because you need a green light to tender resignation, right? In Japanese old system, right? And then the same chap approached me and said, "Can we have a lunch?" or something like that. And I said, "Okay, right." Because now I'm leaving the bank, right? I have nothing to worry about. There's no free lunch, but if they want to have something from me, as I said, I just tendered the resignation. I don't have anything, right? Which happened, and at the lunch, I said to him, I just tender resignation is going to be accepted. So sorry, if you are expecting work from me, you're not going to receive it, right? Because I'm not going to be there anymore, right? Then he changed his attitude completely. And I didn't quite understand what happened, right? And then at that time we finished the lunch. That was in-house lunch, right? And then he said that, could you excuse me because I need to have a chat with my colleagues. There's something going on. I was okay, fine. And I was having a coffee. He brought in other people there. Oh, how do you do? And so right? And we have a chat, etc. And then another person came and said, how do you do, etc. Right? And it all turned out that that was an interview.
Okay.
I didn't apply for a job, right? I just said that I just tendered a resignation to the bank, so I'm a free man, right? And they are so quick to respond and say, good, right? We'd like you to come to our place. And that was a surprise because I didn't study law, right? I was using lawyers, so I could read the loan agreement, right? But not really. I studied law because I studied economics, finance, figures, money, right?
But yeah, but they gauge that when you're working, they can gauge the fact that look at the fact the stamp of being a lawyer is one thing, and the having the capability of handling it is a different thing. So they saw that potential in you as so.
I think what they said to me was as follows. I think we can say that because it's my first farm in London, where I spent nearly 10 years and I was qualified. I received the training. What they said was interesting. They had a number of Japanese clients. And at that time, Vikram, I think you remember, right? All the legal advice was written by way of a letter, right? And we just had a facsimile, right? That changed, but still it's a letter because after we send it by facsimile, we have to send the original by post, right? And they said that we have Japanese clients, but we're not quite sure whether our clients understand it. They understand the contents of our letter of advice. Could you help? Right. So I said, oh, okay, that I can do, even though I didn't study law, but I was receiving end of this letter of advice, right? And if I don't understand, then their clients who are more on the sales side, business side, they wouldn't understand, right? So I pick up the, at that time, the red pen, and they make a scribble and say, no, I don't understand, right? It's a bit too long. Could you make it short, right? Something like that. That's what I started doing, and gradually it became that I got more involved. And at the end, I said to myself, right, okay, that's interesting, right? But I started this as a purely as like just a bridging for the purpose of money, right, income, right? And working 1 day a week, for which they paid a very good money.
Perfect. What else do you want? Perfect.
Yeah.
And here you thought that you won't have anything to do. Suddenly you had something to do. That was good enough.
Right. But then I said to myself, right, because what happened was I started getting involved in the meetings and we've been asked to translate or interpret it, right? And then Japanese client started calling my telephone number, right? Calling me and say that, Mr. Kato, what do you think I should do, right? And I said that I'm not qualified. I'm not allowed to give you advice. And yes, you told me, right? But anyway, what do you think we should do? Tell me. And that's a point where I said, either I stop this work or I become a lawyer, right? And also, other things is I was paid by an hour by that law firm. That's hourly paid, right? And I know what my English colleagues, lawyers, are charging to the clients, right? And there's a big gap there.
Definitely. That's what the firm does.
So then I thought, quite naively, if I get qualified as English lawyer, right, then I should be able to charge this as well as my current one.
That's a little greedy, Kato. That's a little greedy.
It was a bit of hope, right? But I said to the firm, I said, I'm thinking to become an English lawyer like you guys, right? And they welcomed and say, well, we will help you. We will give you assistance, which I understood that they're going to pay me or give a bit of financial help. But what they meant was psychological and emotional assistance, encouragement, right? But they gave me a trainings, right? And it must be very odd to receive a trainee who was in his late 30s at the time, because trainees are in their sort of 23 or 4, right? And they took care of me, they trained me, and I owe very much a lot to my first firm. And that's how I became a sort of English lawyer. But that firm made a strategic choice to focus their overseas activity to Hong Kong. Right? So they're no longer from Japan to Hong Kong. Right? And they're quite open about that. Right? And I think they made a right choice. Because Japan was sinking and Hong Kong was coming up. Right? So I said to them that it's probably has come to that it's a time for us to say goodbye in an amicable way. Right? I still have friends who are just about to be still in the partnership. I do have a communication with them on LinkedIn from time to time. Right? Nice people. So that's how I become an English lawyer.
Very nice. But what was life like in London?
At that time, that's not bad, right? For me, as far as I'm concerned, right? Because Japanese national, Japanese speaker, educated Japan, have a working knowledge in a big Japanese institutions, and he is an English lawyer, right? That's a very rare commodity at the time. I don't know how it is now. I think it may have changed. So I had many Japanese clients who had sort of offices in the UK, and it was amazing sort of finding that the huge Japanese companies, they are huge in Japan, but where they have relatively like a thin or small offices in overseas or in the UK, and most of the general manager or what the managing director of the subsidiary UK office tend to be from the business side, not from the legal or administrative side, right?
Yep, yep.
And they said that I'm a salesman. I don't know anything about that, but we have received this complaint from our UK staff. Tell me what to do, what we should do, right? And so there's so many cases of employment problems, right? And then Japan, as the Japanese economy started down, right, they closed the UK offices. So yeah, I have to deal with their closures, making all the stuff redundant. Right? It was sad, right? But it was important. Somebody have to do it. Right?
No, but other than work, now this is work related, but what about life in London? What did you get Japanese food or not?
Oh yes, yeah. There's a big community.
Yep.
There's a huge Japanese community in
But
London.
lives in a certain part of London? Do they,
I live in the south part of London, London-Kent border.
but is that where I mean, it's like the Japanese stay there, or it was not
No,
like that?
no, there are not very many Japanese there, right? Because most Japanese tend to live in the north, right? Where and also the west, right? There was a expression called the JJ town. Can you guess what it means, JJ town?
Something what Japanese something down what?
Right? Jewish and Japanese.
Oh, okay. So this is where Andrew was talking about.
Yeah.
That's where it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
North, where a bit hilly, right?
Mhm.
And that's where it survived this pandemic last time, yeah? Because they are a bit higher, and for whatever reasons, the more people survived, probably something with the contaminations, the water was cleaner, etc. Right? And that's where the Jewish people, when they're successful, moved up there, right?
Mhm.
And then Japanese community followed because it was safe, relatively safe. Right? And then Japanese school was there, etc., etc. But I didn't live there because it's a too small community, and everybody knows. And I was once a bit surprised. There was a quite large shopping center which was owned by Japanese. It doesn't probably exist anymore, right? And they had a food court, and I from time to time I go there to buy Japanese groceries there, and I was having a Japanese noodles, right, on my own, right, and then next day, when I had a meeting at my office, law office, with Japanese clients, one of them said, "Oh, Mr. Kato, I saw you yesterday eating noodle there." I'm like, oh my God. You saw me eating noodle? Well, so I decided to live away from these guys. So that weekends, no golf, right? No social entertainment, no nothing. During the day, yes, yeah. Eating, drinking, yes, right? But away from them. That's but I like to, yeah, because the work was very exciting, and I cannot tell all of them, right? I'm still bound by the duty of confidentiality, but I can tell that while I was in London, probably in my 20 years in my life, I have gained experience where probably two lawyers would gain in their lifetime. You name it, I have had. I had that one. I had a fraud. I had a personal injury, right? I had a big acquisitions, project finance, you name it. Right? Yeah.
Good experience. Good experience. Overall experience.
Oh, it was a fantastic experience, right? And do you remember that's a pyramid? You know, or the wider your coverage is, you can climb up, right?
Yep.
If your coverage, if your footing is small, and say that I'm a doctor, skin specialist, but I only look at the left side of hand, right? None of this nonsense there.
But give me 1 minute. Let me just put this light on. 1 second.
Yeah.
You can keep talking. I'm listening to you.
No, okay. I see two faces. The two of your faces lined up each other. Right?
But look, I have to keep a backup on the mobile also.
Right. Okay. Right.
But then, what was other life in London?
Life in London, right? So I enjoy it, right? And the reason that I decided to leave London was because my mother was becoming old and she needed assistance, right? The typical with all the sort of generations. And I was commuting from London, right? Every 2 months, but it became a bit impossible. Right? So I said to my firm, my second firm, that I have to, it's a time for me to return to Japan because it's still, I don't know about India, but I'm eldest son, right? I have a younger brother, but there's expectation that the first son will look after his parents, right? And that logic comes up when it is convenient to my brother. So my brother had just opened his dental surgery, right? And he was stuck in his dental surgery, dental clinic. He couldn't move out because he was just struggling to take care of his patient or whatever. And so it was easier for me to return to Japan and do whatever necessary. Right? So that has prompted me to return to Japan, and that it's now 10 years.
But when you came back, I'm sure after you've lived so long in London, so were there some kind of adjusting issues there?
Oh yes, it's a continuing ones, right? Because as far as my legal profession is concerned, I still remain English common lawyer, right? And I think like the common lawyer thinks. And although I'm a member of the Tokyo Bar Association, but that's I belong to a special branch where they pack all the foreigners into a special branch.
Okay.
They call it special membership, right?
Mhm.
Basically, that's only for foreign jurisdiction, not proper Japanese lawyers, right? And
But you didn't plan to do the qualification there. You didn't think of that.
I thought about that, and I was trying preparing for half a year.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, then that's the time because I was with a Japanese law firm for a short while, and a friend of mine who came to me when he was studying in Europe, right? And he stayed with me for half a year. He returned to his farm and he was a managing partner there. And he approached me and saying that, well, Mr. Kato-san, nobody really wants you to become Japanese lawyer, because there are already too many of them. We have also got quite a lot of them, right?
There are always too many of them in every country. Too many of them.
Right. And he said that, well, instead, could you come to our place, because we have young lawyers who would like to get into the international business, right? And well, we suggested it's a time for you to train our younger generations there. And I didn't think about that at all, because I was doing things happily on my own, right? Or using assistants of my previous firm. But now at that time, I didn't have any more associates, these called, right? And well, other colleagues in London. And then I thought, well, maybe I have a try, right? And so I joined, and I spent about a year and a half or so. They are very good firm, but I didn't feel like staying there forever, right? And I don't know why. I think the Japanese lawyers are super intelligent, right? I think it's probably the same in India. It's very tough to pass the exam, right?
Look, that part of it is little debatable. But there are, I mean, I would think that we churn out too many lawyers. I think this one Supreme Court judge commented on that. He says only 25% of the people who finish their law degree are really capable of practicing law.
Right.
So,
Well, in Japan, somehow similar, right? People study law and receive the undergraduate degree, but not many would go into the legal professions there, right? Only a small fractions. And at that time, the pass rate was something like 2%, 3% of the state exam, right? And anybody with the right mind would not take the risk of challenging something the pass rate is 2 or 3%, right? But those who did it are so, first of all, they are intelligent in a sense of they mark very high, right? They are very sort of proud of themselves, right? And a bit difficult to train, right? They don't like doing donkey works. Whereas, I think probably the same in India, right? Many of legal works are mundane, sort of administrative legal works, right? Which we do diligently, right? And only occasionally we use our top of our brain, right?
but I hear that you have to develop your practice to what you enjoy doing. That mundane works, I mean, for me, that was something that I really didn't enjoy doing. So I actually had other people doing that. So that,
Yeah. Well, so I still because I started working in a bank where this mundane administrative works, repetitive works are very important. Don't make any errors. You do it properly. You're supposed to do it. You just do it, right? And I spent first 14 years in that environment. So I expect similar sort of discipline, right? But that was not shared by the young sort of elite Japanese lawyers, yeah, who are cream of the cream in the society, right? But I stayed there for two years or so, something like that, right?
but the only thing in all this, it is all about work, work, work. What about other things, playing some sport, other hobbies, something else? What about those parts of life?
The funny thing is that when my work was so successful, quite successful in London, because I probably had 60 major Japanese clients, and one or two or three in each industry sector, which meant that I had a lot of marketing budget to spend. Right? And what I started in London was that by chance I came to know that there are many Japanese music students who finished their courses, degrees in Japan, top class, right? And want to progress their careers further and came to London. But competition is so high that they are struggling, right? And they needed financial assistance, right? But I didn't just want to. I didn't want to just give money to them. Right? It's against their professionalism. So what I started was that I asked one of them to teach me playing the piano. I asked another one to teach me how to sing in a classical way, vocal singing, right?
Now, Kato, now you have to sing. Okay, okay, okay. What else? Okay, what else? Piano and singing. Then what else?
But probably next time. Right? But
No.
then
Come up with
funny
your.
thing happened was that I thought that well, it's a pity that I'm singing on my own, so I should have a mate, right? So I talked to my Japanese clients who are working in London, right? For different industries, travel industries or IT industry, so many people, right? And say, send an email to them. We just started having email at that time. If you have anybody in your company who has done singing, please let me know because I want to establish a singing group, choir, right? And then we have 5 or 6 guys, right, who said, yes, I want to join you, right? So we had the small male voice choir or singing group for which I find another instructor. So all these music students are very, very happy. And then that was fun, right? And then one day I thought that it's a pity that we have only male voices, boys, right? We want to have girls as well, right?
Absolutely.
Then it became a sort of mixed voice choir, right? And that was full of fun. Right?
Very nice. That is what, it wasn't only work because I thought maybe it was just like.
Oh, no, that, as often the case, well, it's like we cannot imagine Vikram without golf, right? So
Yes.
it must be together, right?
Yeah.
And in a somehow similar way, music activities. No, I didn't like just passively listening, but even if you are poor or make mistakes, you actively participate. And at one of the memorable thing is, this Beethoven's choir. Dun 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 dun, right? I formed a group of about 60 Japanese the men and women, right? And we joined with their local choir who are desperately looking to expand, right, for the concert, right? And we had the concert, right, which was in a big church. That was quite an experience in a lifetime. But strangely, right? By the way, I also started playing cello.
Wow. No, but the piano reached what level? You were very good at it.
Oh, the intermediary ones. Piano, there's only 3 pieces that I can play, or I could play, right? One is that, the For Elise, everybody's favorite. When I finished that once, I asked my piano teacher, well, what next piece do you think I should do? And she said, either anyone you like. What is it so? Isn't it that we have to go stage by stage, and then after this you go to this and this and this? I said, no, don't care about that. That's all Japanese style. Don't care about that. You pick up anyone you like.
But you could read. You could read those sheets. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
once
yeah,
you
yeah. Because I did also enjoy the sort of learning, the reading notes in my school days,
Mhm.
in elementary school, middle school, and but I have to say, it was all time, right? So it took some time for me to get it back. Right?
But you still play.
Occasionally, right?
But that should be good for the brain. It should be very good for the brain if you, I
Oh
mean,
yes,
write.
yes, absolutely. You're spot on, right? Because that used right side hemisphere of your brain, something artistic, right?
Yeah.
Like emotions there, right? And legal side is logic. It's the left side, right? And if you don't use both from time to time, not at the same time probably, but you have to keep a balance, right? It's if you live in a logic only, right, you just become quite unstable, right? You're probably not very happy. And
Because I find it really interesting. Like, just the fact, even when you're playing the music, there your right hand and left hand playing different notes and everything, to get used to all that must be difficult. That must be
I can
difficult.
tell you this is I find it fascinating, right? Or many people tend to say that, oh, I gave a big concert, so many people came, etc., right? And I asked my cello teacher, who was a Polish, and I asked him, "Have you had experience? I mean, he's a professional player, so right? Have you had experience where one of your audience uh, cried, tears when hearing your performance?" He pondered, and he got, "Yes, there was once." Right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that this is something like a spiritual experience we're talking about, right? And he said that because his wife was also cellist, right? And he said professional musicians will probably come across once in their lifetime where it just happened that the person in the audience were in tears. It doesn't happen very often, right?
It can, yeah.
And
It's a
and
very.
I had that privilege once in my small choir. Right? It just for whatever reasons, the boys and girls are singing, right? And that song was "Home Sweet Home."
Mhm.
The ta 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 tu 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 tu, and we sang it in front of in the occasion of a reconciliation of British soldiers and Japanese soldiers of their war in Burma or Myanmar now, right?
Mhm.
There's a reconciliations, and the Japanese old man approached me and said, "Mr. Kato, right, we have these occasions, right? And could you your guys will do something, some performance for us?" Yeah. And he raised the bar high, and he said, "To console the soul of my war mates." Right? God, right? I was I was intimidated of the thought because he lost hundreds of the war colleagues there, but but he wanted to do the reconciliation with the British soldiers with whom they had a combat. Right? And it was all up to me, what sort of music would you like to do, to us to play? And then he said, let's leave it to you. Right? So I picked up this piece because that is known, of course, among the British people as well as Japanese people. Right? The many Japanese people thought that was a Japanese song. That's simply because they were taught that they are one of the music that everybody was taught at that time at elementary schools with Japanese words, right? So they thought I was Japanese music, right? And I did a sort of arrangement in the 4 male voices and the 2 sort of the female voices on top of it, like angels. Yeah. And
but did you record it? Did you record any of this?
There may be somewhere. Right? I must have still somewhere. Right?
That should be interesting to see.
Yeah, but it's all in my memory because when you see that dozens of big guys are in tears, right? It is something. It doesn't happen very often, even as a musician. It doesn't matter how skillful you are, right? You just, and not intentionally, but you touch the people's heart, right?
Well, that's
So,
what music can do. That it's a powerful,
yes,
very powerful.
yeah. But music is very powerful, and again, one of the reasons I was happy studying psychology is that music the stimulation comes directly to your brain. You don't think about that. Yeah. That's why, for example, do you have a harmonica, right? Harmonica if you play harmonica in front of a dog, then see what the dog would do.
Please tell us what it is.
No, they do it. Ooh, ooh, ooh.
Wow, that much of a reaction, huh?
Right? I think it touches their instinct, right? As a wolf, right?
Okay.
That sounds, right? So we've been talking now over an hour now, right? Longer, right? 2 hours now.
That's okay. Look, Kato, once you start off, you can go on. So it's all a matter of.
Well, I'm not making a record, right? 4 hours is too much for me.
Yeah. No, that's just totally. I mean, the fact is you are the guest, so I cannot say anything. But I'm just looking at that. I'm just on YouTube. Dogs howl to harmonica. I was just looking at that aspect. So it does happen. It does happen. This guy is trying to play that. I won't play it here because the fact is these are all copyright things. If I play it on the show, then that my video will come under the copyright issue.
Well, I take sort of action against anybody who circulates this without my permission. It's copyright protected.
No, but this whole concept of memories and music connected to each other, it can bring out good memories, bad memories in people. It's quite an interesting thing that how these are stored inside.
I think probably this I haven't told you, but it's easy to understand in this way. When you are in infancy, your memory doesn't last. Still, you have a memory, right? 2 years old, 3 years old, they have a memory, but they don't last. They don't hold. And probably the initial memory most people have is 4 or 5 years old. Right? That's a time when you have a long-term memory, and you build up your memory, right? All the time, all your lifetime. And then when you reach the age of whatever, and when you have the aging problem like Alzheimer's disease, my mother had Alzheimer's disease, then the memory will start disappearing from the top. therefore, somebody who don't remember who are the family members, like when the old lady sees that's her daughter and say, "Oh, how do you do?" Right? And what's your name? Right? Don't recognize own daughter, but still that old lady are likely to remember when she was, for example, 12 years old. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's staggering. That's how memory works. Right? And it's all the wisdom or learning that I place a lot of value there. Very interesting.
Yeah. The human brain. Now you're studying the human brain. You will teach us a lot about it.
It's never-ending stories, and yeah, because we always find something new.
Yeah.
And also, these days, we hope that this the AI and also the scanning the brain. Right?
Mm-hmm.
In the past, we had only this MRI, which makes such a noise. It's deafening noise. Right? We will probably soon have a quieter versions, and that would be something, because then I think that we can do it even now to some extent. Well, while we are talking, you just monitor how my brain is functioning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Without all these sort of interference.
That's interesting, actually, when you find out the connections between a lot of things that happen in the brain.
Yeah, and I think it has a lot of help. I wouldn't call it application, but help when we are sort of dealing with the problems, or inner mediations, or even the daily sort of hustle there. Right? The wisdom and the learnings that you have enables you to understand other people better. Right?
Yep.
Sometimes there's a danger that we feel that we understand because we are clever. There's a danger there. Right?
Yeah. So basically, then now you're in Japan. Now you're going to stick here. Now this is it. You're not planning to move somewhere.
I would like to return to London if possible, but
Mm-hmm.
there are one thing which is they're making it difficult. Right? I think I told you some time ago, about a month ago, that I'm type 2 diabetics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which my father has given to me. All my paternal sort of males, that side have diabetics, right? Type 2. It's what is called inheritance, DNA related
Genetic,
one.
yeah, genetic
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
And that get worse. That was the terrible situation when I was in London, because I was eating, drinking a lot every day with clients, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was having a good time, right? Like having a concert, etc. But my diabetics treatment was brilliant, right? Because you have heard about the British sort of National Health Service, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's free to everybody, right? But what it means is that they will give you old generic sort of medications,
Mm.
because it's free, right?
Yeah. Which is okay. Which is okay. What's the problem with generic? It's okay.
Well, the oh yeah, I'm talking to somebody from India, so you may have a different interpretation, but that's the old medications when as the patent had expired, right? I know that in India you don't care and you just produce the generics only a
Yeah.
half
Yeah.
year later. Yeah.
We have a provision there where it can be done. Yeah.
Yeah, but not in other places. That means that I I was not receiving the right ones medications, And when I complained that my situation was not getting better, the doctor said that you blame yourself for your lifestyle.
Wow.
Right? But half joke, but she said that I can try to get you a sort of more advanced ones or new ones. But for that, you have to go to the specialist, specialist, right? Who only look at here, specialist, right? And for the appointment to see that specialist, right, you have to wait for 3 months. Right?
Yeah.
And well, it was too long for me, right? And then the appointment was canceled, right? And the next time I couldn't get there. And then the problem with diabetics is that because it doesn't hurt you, you don't feel pain, right?
Yeah.
So it's sleepingly, silently killing your
Killing you
body.
inside. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's all later happened that I didn't come back. I came back to Japan to take care of my mother, but I had to find a new doctor in Japan because I was keeping sort of medications there. And when I showed my new doctor, uh, this is the medication I was receiving, I was having in London. He just had a look and said, I didn't quite understand what's wrong. And I said, nobody's using that anymore in Japan.
No, but Kato, were you at the same time exercising or not?
These days, a bit less. At that time, I started playing tennis,
Mhm.
but unfortunately, I had a skiing accident. I went to skiing in Tyrol, Austria. That was when I was still in London. I love skiing, right? But there's a bit of no accident, incident,
Mhm.
because it's my fault, and I
What
badly injured my ankle.
what was the incident? You have to tell us what the incident was.
It was I was standing on the slope, right? Yeah, and tried to move. Then that was become some partly become ice burn, right?
Mhm.
And then, right? And I very badly twisted my left ankle, right?
Okay.
And that was painful. That is almost like losing momentarily half unconscious.
Oh.
And I should have went to the hospital straight away, but I didn't like it. Right? So I just put up with it, and then gradually the pain disappeared. And it later turned out that it became like sort of a complex fractures, and unfortunately, I had to receive the surgery back in Japan a few years later, and that's made it difficult to keep playing tennis and other sort of hard hard sports.
But walking is okay.
Walking is fine. Yes, I walk and I took pictures like this, which is in my neighborhood, a bit hilly, right, at the top of the hill, right, and then pictures. Right.
So that's something I think diabetics need to do, which I think maybe getting to that kind of a routine might be difficult for some people, but I think it's essential. I think
I think it's a
five,
good
seven, 5, 7 kilometers, I think you must walk.
5 kilometers, right?
That's what they say. But you never took to golf. All Japanese out here, whoever work here, they all
Yeah.
take to golf, or they already have taken to golf in Japan. Oh,
Well, am I right? You live in a golf course, right?
no. I stay close to. They're not very far from a golf course.
Yeah.
About
Because
15 minutes away.
the only thing I remember from your homepage is that you said you live on the golf course.
Either I live on golf courses or on screens around the world. No,
But
but you never took to golf.
but I tried, but I didn't like it. I didn't like the hitting of a ball which is in standing.
That's the
I
toughest
hate
one.
that.
That's the toughest one, Kato. The one that moves is easy. The tennis one is easy. It comes to you.
Well, I liked moving ones.
That's the easy one. No, but
Is it
how comes?
easier?
Yeah, yeah. But how come so many Japanese take to golf? I mean, it's they're crazy about it.
Oh, yeah, they like golf. Yes, I don't know why.
Crazy about it. Not just like they're crazy about it.
Well, not everybody,
Mm.
I can tell you the doctors, lawyers, they all like golf, male or female. They all like golf, right?
Koreans also. Yeah, we have a lot of Koreans that come here to
All
play.
right, right. There must be something in golf which
Maybe
they,
it's a break. I think
yeah,
it's a break from whatever's happening. You're out there on the golf course in the open.
yeah,
Maybe that
yeah.
is a good. They need that with all the hard work that they're putting in.
And mind you, if you go to the golf course, you have a perfect excuse to your wife or partner that say, "Oh, it's a part of my job to
Job.
keep my colleagues happy. I was entertaining my clients. That's important." And oh, I was with the president of the company, and he was he's very important. I cannot afford losing him, right? So I have a next one next weekend. Sorry, but I have to do it. I want to spend your time with you, but I love to, but I cannot do it. Right?
No, but
So
interesting thing. But there's a Korean woman who was playing with me. She's wanted me to guess her age. So I mean, okay, whatever. I said maybe about 55 or something. Look, I'm 70. Look at me. I'm so fit and everything. So she said Korean women are very fit for whatever reason. And she keeps herself busy and everything. Did not, I mean, there was no way that you could say she's 70. Really?
well, the fact of the matter is probably somehow ironically, but you see only fit people. Right?
Yeah, maybe.
If they are unfit, you would not see them. Right?
No, but she specifically said that Korean women they stay fit. That's what she said. We keep ourselves
I
busy.
Well, things are relative, but there are yeah, I know that there are in Japan and even in Tokyo there are many particularly elderly sort of men who are stuck in withdrawn and stuck in their own place.
Mhm.
Right, that's become a problem there, right? Because they feel that it's their shame to seek for assistance.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, they've been doing that. That's exactly what I thought. That she was also saying that I do all my work, everything. I do my gardening. I spend. Basically,
yeah,
I'm active all the time.
yeah.
So maybe that's what keeps them fit.
Probably right, but what happens if you become incapable, of
Yeah, that's tough. Honestly,
doing it? Right? Then at that time you should be able to say, help me. Well, but in the most many Japanese the men, but women are a bit different. The men find it difficult to say. It's like they're admitting that you are the failure. Yeah, you failed in your life. I cannot do it. Right? Yeah. Oh.
but what about got all these creative things that you all these, I mean, pottery and other things that you have in Japan? Did you take to any of that? Any of these hobbies as such?
Hobbies, right? I think all the lots of studying new thing is definitely it's partly my hobby and partly I hope turn into my next professions. Right?
Very good, very good.
Yeah, because what it means is whether it's a hobby or whatever you call it, it's not black and white.
Yeah,
You-
exactly, exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
that's where it should be.
yeah.
But now, am I seeing you on Saturday or not? You're coming on Saturday for sure.
Saturday. What time does it start? Does it usual time?
Usually it's 7:30.
Yeah, yeah. I'll be.
I know it gets a little late for you, but I
Right.
don't know.
Thank you.
I have to balance that out also. Yep.
Mm.
Okay.
Was it been a pleasure to talking you.
It's always a pleasure talking to you, Kato. But am I supposed to say Kato, Tero? Tero? That's
Kato is fine. Many people, I don't care whichever way you call me, so long as I can recognize that I'm called. Right?
but Kato is like the surname. That's the surname.
Some people, some polite Japanese people tend to call me Kato-san. San
Kato-san.
is very generic, right? But it's surprising that so many people call me just Kato.
Okay.
The British people do not call me Kato because they pronounce it, they can only pronounce it as Kato.
Kato. But
Which
the
is a
name,
bit, yeah,
but the name is Teruo.
now the name is Teruo, and again, most British people cannot pronounce Teruo. So many people called me Kato when I was there. I don't mind, whatever they were, fine, fine.
No, but what does Teruo mean?
It means, you may laugh, but it means the bright man.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Chinese letters we use, and it means like not bright. It's more like illuminating. Bright in that sense. It's make it like a sunshine. Right? And man is like sort of a. It's also like part of the word used in a hero, right? So male hero,
Okay. Okay.
illuminating male hero.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Kato.
Okay, right. See you.
And we'll see you on